It was freezing outside. The kind of cold that doesn't just bite your skin, it crawls into your bones and makes you feel like the world itself is rejecting you. That night, the wind screamed through our street like it was angry. The lamps flickered. The sky looked heavy, like snow might fall any second. I stood at our gate with my thin sweater pulled tight around my body, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. And the worst part wasn't the cold. The worst part was knowing the warmth I needed was only a few steps away behind my own front door. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. I tried again, harder this time. "Amy, please open the door." Still nothing. I could see the living room light through the curtain. I could even hear the television, a faint laugh track drifting through the glass, as if everything inside was normal. As if the person outside wasn't your daughter, shaking like a leaf, trying not to cry. I called her phone. It rang. She didn't pick up. I called again. Ring, ring, ring. Then it stopped, and in that moment, something inside me broke, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet crack like ice splitting under pressure. I pressed my forehead against the cold metal of the gate and whispered, "Why?" I didn't end up outside that night because I was rebellious or careless. I didn't sneak out to meet anyone. I didn't do anything shameful. I was 21, working a small job at a clothing store, saving every rupee I could. That evening, my boss asked me to stay late because the winter sale had brought crowds and we were short-staffed. I texted my mother, "Amy, I'll be late. Please keep dinner. Don't lock the main door." She saw it. I know she saw it because the message showed seen. But when I reached home at nearly midnight, the gate was locked from inside, and the main door was bolted like I was a stranger. I knocked again, my voice shaking. "Amy? It's me." Finally the curtain moved. A shadow passed. I held my breath, relief rushing through me until I heard her voice. Cold, flat, unrecognizable. "Go away." I froze. "What?" I said. "Go away," she repeated, louder this time, as if I was someone trying to break in. "I told you to be home before 10. "Amy, please," I begged. "I told you I had to work late. It's freezing. Open the door." There was a pause, long enough for me to hope. Then she said the words I will never forget. "Let the cold teach you respect." I stared at the door like it had turned into a wall. "Respect? Amy, I'm your daughter." Her tone sharpened. "A daughter listens. A daughter doesn't argue. You think you're a woman now because you earn a little money? If you want freedom, go live outside." My throat tightened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bang the door until my hands bled. But I didn't, because I knew my mother. When she decided you were wrong, nothing could change her mind. Not logic, not tears, not the truth. She didn't punish you to correct you. She punished you to break you. The wind slammed into my face, stealing the warmth from my skin. My teeth began to chatter. I tried to call my older brother, but he didn't answer. I tried my aunt straight to voicemail. My friends lived too far, and my battery was dying. I sat on the steps outside, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to make myself smaller against the cold. My breath came out in white clouds. I rubbed my hands until they burned, and I thought about all the times my mother had locked me out emotionally long before she ever locked the door. When I was 14 and begged her not to send me to a relative's house where a cousin made me uncomfortable, she told me, "Stop imagining things." When I cried because my father yelled at me for dropping a glass, she said, "If you were smarter, you wouldn't make mistakes." When I scored high marks and wanted to celebrate, she said, "Don't get proud. Nothing was ever enough." I was either too loud or too quiet, too soft or too stubborn. And somehow in her eyes, love was always something I had to earn. My phone buzzed. A message from her. "You wanted to be independent, now prove it." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Tears slid down my cheeks, hot against the freezing air. I turned my face away from the street because I didn't want anyone to see me like that, like a girl begging for warmth from the one person who should have given it freely. After an hour, I couldn't feel my toes. After 2 hours, my body started to ache the way it does right before you get sick. My head felt light, my vision blurred. I kept standing up and sitting down just to keep blood moving through my legs. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps. Someone was coming down the street. I stood quickly, wiping my face. An old neighbor uncle, wrapped in a thick shawl, stopped when he saw me. "Beta, why are you sitting outside?" My voice cracked. "The door is locked." He looked at the house, then at me, and his eyes filled with something like sadness and anger. He knocked on our gate loud and firm. "Sister, open the door. Your daughter is outside." The curtain moved again. My mother's voice came, sharp as ever. "It's not your business." "It becomes my business when a child is freezing," he snapped. "If something happens to her, you will answer for it." There was silence. Then the latch clicked. The door opened just a little, not wide enough to feel welcome. My mother stood there, arms crossed, her face hard like stone. "Come," she said, not softly, not kindly like she was letting a stray dog in. I stepped inside, my legs weak. Warm air hit my skin, and instead of relief, I felt humiliation. The neighbor uncle sighed and walked away. The street became quiet again. My mother locked the door behind me and turned to face me. "Next time," she said, "you will remember the time." I stared at her. My lips were blue, my hands were red, my eyes were swollen from crying. And she looked at me like I was the problem. Something in me shifted then. Not hatred, not rage, just clarity. I realized that night wasn't a lesson for me. It was a warning that in this house, love had conditions, warmth had a price, and even blood could turn cold. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed without taking off my shoes. My whole body shook, but I wasn't shaking from the cold anymore. I was shaking from the truth. The next morning I woke up with a fever. My throat burned. My head felt heavy. My mother placed tea outside my door like it was duty, not care. And as I sipped it, I made a decision. If my own mother could lock me out in the freezing night and sleep peacefully inside, then one day I would build a life so strong, so warm, so safe, that no one would ever have the power to leave me outside again. Not even her. The fever didn't leave me for 3 days. I lay on my bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house cups clinking, the TV humming, my mother's footsteps moving freely through rooms I suddenly felt exiled from. No one came to check on me. No one asked if I was okay. Food appeared outside my door like charity, not care. That hurt more than the cold ever did. On the 4th morning, I dragged myself to work anyway. Missing a day meant losing pay, and losing pay meant losing the tiny freedom I was slowly building. As I walked to the bus stop, my body weak and aching, I replayed that night again and again. Let the cold teach you respect. The words burned deeper than any fever. At work, my manager looked at me and frowned. "You look sick. You should be home." I forced a smile. "I'm fine." That was a lie I had learned early. In my house, being fine was survival. If you admitted pain, it was either ignored or used against you. During my lunch break, I sat alone in the storage room, hugging my coat around me. For the first time, a thought I had always pushed away came back clear and terrifying. I can't live like this forever. That night, I didn't go straight home. I sat on a bench near the bus stop, watching people hurry past, couples sharing scarves, mothers adjusting their children's hats. I wondered how warmth came so easily to some people, while others had to beg for it. When I finally reached home, my mother was waiting. "You're late again," she said without looking at me. "I was sick," I replied quietly. She scoffed. "Excuses." Something inside me tightened. I had a fever. I could barely stand. She turned to me then, her eyes sharp. "You think I never worked sick? You think life is easy for women? Stop acting weak." Weak. That word followed me into my room and stayed there long after the lights went out. Days turned into weeks. Winter deepened. The house felt colder even when the heater was on. I stopped sharing things with my mother, my plans, my fears, my small joys. I learned to move quietly, to keep my head down, to disappear without actually leaving. But disappearing has a cost. One evening I overheard her talking to my aunt on the phone. "She's changed," my mother said. "Doesn't talk much, always tired. This job has made her arrogant." Arrogant. Because I worked. Because I dreamed of a life beyond locked doors. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, not because of her words, but because I finally understood something painful. She didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as a responsibility that refused to stay small. The breaking point came a week later. My salary had just come in. I was counting the notes in my room, planning how much to save, how much to spend on food, when my mother walked in without knocking. "You got paid?" she asked. "Yes, give me half." I looked up, stunned. "Why?" "Because you live here. Because I raised you." I swallowed hard. "I already pay for groceries. I buy my own clothes." Her voice rose. "Are you questioning me now?" The room felt smaller. The walls pressed in. I remembered the gate. The cold. The silence. "No," I said slowly. "I'm just saying I need to save." Her face hardened. "Save? For what?" "To leave." The truth hung between us. She stepped closer. "As long as you're under my roof, you will do as I say." Under her roof. The same roof that had shut me out in the cold. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed a small bag. Just clothes, my documents, and the little money I had hidden. My hands shook, but my mind was calm in a way it had never been before. At dawn, I slipped out quietly. No goodbye. No note. I stayed with a coworker for a few days, then moved into a tiny shared room near my job. It was cramped, the walls thin, the mattress old, but the door locked from the inside. For the first time in my life, that lock meant safety. I worked harder than ever. I saved every extra coin. Some nights, I went to bed hungry, but it was different now. This hunger had purpose. This cold had an end. Months passed. Winter faded. Spring arrived softly, like an apology. One evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Where are you?" she demanded. "I moved out." Silence. "Then, how could you leave without telling me?" I almost laughed. "You taught me how." She didn't understand that. She never would. "I'm your mother," she said. "You can't survive without me." I looked around my small room, my safe room, and felt something close to peace. "I already am," I replied. She hung up. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights glow against the dark. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and breathed deeply. I was still healing, still scared, still learning, but one thing was certain. The girl who froze outside a locked door no longer lived inside me, and I promised myself, no matter how cold the world became, I would never again beg for warmth where love was locked. Summer came quietly, the way healing often does, without announcement, without applause. By then, I had been living on my own for almost 8 months. The room was still small. The walls were still thin. But every morning, I woke up knowing one thing for certain. No one could lock me out anymore. I worked 2 jobs now, mornings at the clothing store, evenings at a small cafe. I learned how to survive on little sleep and even less comfort. My hands grew rough. My feet ached constantly, but my heart felt lighter than it ever had under my mother's roof. Some nights exhaustion would hit me so hard I'd sit on the floor, back against the bed, and cry. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that came from years of holding everything in. I cried for the girl who had stood freezing outside her own home. I cried for the child who learned early that love had rules. But I also cried for myself now, because I was still standing. One evening, after a long shift at the cafe, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was my brother. "We need to talk," he said. I hesitated, then agreed to meet at a small tea stall near the bus stand. When I arrived, he was already there, scrolling through his phone, looking uncomfortable. "You didn't have to leave like that," he began. I wrapped my fingers around the warm cup of tea, grounding myself. I didn't have to be locked out either, he sighed. Ami didn't mean it like that. I looked up at him. Then how did she mean it? He had no answer. She cries sometimes, he added, says you abandoned her. I smiled sadly. Funny how parents call it abandonment when children finally choose themselves. He stared into his tea. She wants you to come home. Home. That word no longer meant what it once did. I can visit, I said calmly, but I won't live there again. His eyebrows rose. Why are you being so stubborn? I met his eyes, steady and unafraid, because the cold taught me something too. A week later I visited the house. The gate opened easily this time. The living room looked the same sofa, the same curtains, the same television murmuring in the background. But I was different. I stood taller. I spoke slower. I no longer needed permission to exist. My mother sat across from me, studying my face as if searching for something. You've lost weight, she said. I work a lot. She nodded, then said, almost reluctantly, you look stronger. I waited. Silence filled the room. Finally she spoke. That night, I didn't think it would be that cold. I felt something twist inside me, not relief, not forgiveness, just awareness. I did, I replied. Her lips tightened. Parents make mistakes. Yes, I said, and children remember them. Her eyes flashed. So you'll punish me forever? I shook my head. No, I'm just protecting myself. She looked away, her voice quieter now. I raised you. I know, I said gently, and I'm grateful for what you gave. But I'm also allowed to leave what hurt me. For a moment I thought she might cry. She didn't. I stood up. I'll visit sometimes, on my terms. She didn't stop me when I left. As months passed, my life slowly took shape. I saved enough to move into a slightly better place. I enrolled in evening classes. I made friends, real ones who didn't confuse control with love. One winter night, exactly a year after the door had been locked on me, the cold returned. I stood by my window, watching the same kind of wind howl through the streets. Snow fell softly, coating the world in silence. I wrapped myself in a thick blanket, held a warm cup of tea, and thought of that girl standing outside, shivering, begging to be let in. And for the first time I didn't feel pain. I felt compassion for her. For me. I whispered into the quiet room, you survived. That night taught me something no lecture ever could. That love without safety isn't love. That obedience isn't respect. That sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is walk away from the place she was taught to endure. My mother never apologized. But I no longer needed her to, because I learned that warmth doesn't always come from family. Sometimes it comes from finally choosing yourself and locking the door behind you from the inside. Life didn't become perfect, but it became mine. I changed jobs, then careers. I failed once, twice, learned slowly, and stood up every time. I built routines that felt like kindness. Hot tea before sunrise, a lock I trusted, silence that didn't scare me anymore. I learned that peace is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply stays. My mother and I spoke less. When we did, our conversations were careful, distant, almost polite. She never asked me to come back. I never asked her to understand. Some gaps aren't meant to be closed, only respected. One winter evening, a young girl at the cafe stayed late, shivering in a thin jacket. Without thinking, I handed her my scarf. Keep it, I said. It's cold. She smiled like warmth had found her. Walking home, I realized something quietly powerful. The night that tried to break me had shaped me instead. I didn't become hard. I became aware. Aware of boundaries. Aware of my worth. Aware that love should never require freezing outside a door. And if anyone ever tried to lock me out again, they'd find I no longer wait. In the cold, on the coldest nights, I sometimes still remember that gate. The metal against my forehead. My hands numb. My heart waiting for love that never came. But the memory no longer hurts the way it used to, because I understand something now that I didn't back then. That night wasn't about punishment. It was about power, and walking away was the first time I took mine back. My mother is older now, quieter. Sometimes she looks at me like she wants to say something, an apology, maybe. But the words never come. And that's okay. Not every story ends with forgiveness. Some end with freedom. I built a life where doors open when I come home, where warmth isn't conditional, where love doesn't test me to prove I deserve it. The girl who once stood outside in the freezing cold, she survived. And the woman she became will never wait in the cold again.